Author Assist has been assisting authors since 2015. Everyone has a book inside of them. Are you ready to write yours? Author Assist offers affordable publishing packages for ebooks and paperbacks that don't cost $10,000. We have an extensive multimedia package that will improve your book's visibility. That includes a trailer created by an award-winning designer, a radio show that goes out live worldwide, and excerpt narrations. Author Assist also offers a fabulous mentoring and coaching package. Your mentor will set goals, discuss the publishing choices and your limitations. Coaching includes classes in design, promotion and marketing. Author Assist is the official graphic designer for GoIndieNow. And our podcast, Behind the Pen, has just gone to TV. Your book could be seen by a possible 150 million homes. Contact Author Assist. See how we can help you in your publishing journey.
Three-act structure is back, and we are setting the stage for another great season. Now that we have our stories and characters, we need somewhere for them to go, but not just anywhere. It needs to challenge and heighten their senses, provide the obstacles to overcome, and even within these settings, there has to lie structure. A 3-act structure.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Vega. I am a author, of course, that's why I'm here. But my latest book is called The Elements. It is an epic fantasy following 6 people who are tasked with saving the world and the gates of heaven. I also have a book out that is a psychological thriller and a short story collection of scary stories.
I am Justin Brimhall. I'm the author of the book Fallen Revenge. It's the first book of the series. Book 2 is going to be coming out sometime this year, and I'm currently working on book 3. I also scribe for the God Dinless on the online magazine called inthepantheon.com.
My name is Lynn, but I write under the name L. Bachman. I'm kind of known for the Blasphemer series, which is very horror, heaven, hell, angel type stories. I've been a part of some anthologies in the past. I've got 2 books of dark poetry out. I am the audio editor and co-host with the wonderful J.K. Allen of the Pajama People podcast.
Hi, I'm JD Blackrose. I write for Falstaff Books and for Bellbridge Books, and I've been in a number of anthologies. One of the books that I am referring to a lot today in the discussion of setting is this book. Here we go, Demon Kissed. And it's the first book in the Summoner's Mark series. And then there's ones after that called Fae Crossed, Hellbound, and an online-only novella called Salmon's Bargain. There are 3 more books coming in that series.
So let's talk a little bit about how you transition. You have this portal that goes to one part of the real world into the other world very seamlessly. So my curiosity is, how much did you think about how to make that as seamless as possible? Was there a lot of thought put behind how to get from one world to the other, and how did you feel like you distinguished the two? What did you do specifically in your process to make sure that you were distinguishing from the real world to the fantasy world and making sure that us as readers knew what you were doing?
That's a good question, because I didn't think about it really at all. It just because in my story, there's demons, angels, gods, goddesses. They're like the whole range of things, how the demons travel us through hell, and kind of like just how it's like dark and like there's things looking at you as you're traveling. So it's more of like the description of what's happening, that you're no longer on like the normal plane of existence.
I took kind of a literal approach with mine. It was in my lore, the heavenly angels have that power to pierce through the veil. So if they wanted to descend from heaven to earth, they can do that. The fallen angels live on earth amongst humanity. When they fell from heaven in the first war, that's where they were cast down to. But when my main character kind of gets in between those, I tried to treat it as a dream kind of state, because we've all had dreams where you don't know how you got there. The transitions don't make a lot of sense. Either you'll go from one thing to the next that has nothing to do with it. So I kind of tried to treat it that way, that he was in the physical world and then he wasn't. And it was sort of like a fever dream. And then once that was through, the next time that we interact with him, he's on the outskirts of creation, which I called the fringe. So it's kind of, he's between worlds. So in between worlds, in my mind, was very white. Like there's nothing. It's nothingness. And obviously, angels being as powerful as they are, they can pierce through that stuff.
My character is a summoner. She can summon powers from demons and other things from various other planes of existence. But she also has the ability to cross over into those planes. And so what I call it is spin drifting, and she can spin drift, which means that she can literally walk the DNA between the worlds. And there's a whole process, and it sounds so weird now that I'm saying it, but the process for her, which I imagine in my head is different for every summoner, is that she sort of winds up walking this twisting, winding path that is somehow related to where she left. And then she has to enter this like Costco like warehouse supercenter, and she gets greeted by the greeters, and then winds up buying things there because she has to buy things there. It's much better than I'm making it sound.
It is.
But she winds up in this warehouse supercenter because part of it, and I've never told anyone this, so Joe, I'm going to tell something that I've never told. Right?
Okay.
But the warehouse is essentially a purgatory, because I just imagine like that would be the worst place to have to spend, like, to wait forever. And the people that are there sort of, that's where they are. They haven't really moved on one way or the other, and they're sort of like stuck. And she buys things there like free reign, or you can buy things like a message in a bottle, or things that aren't things but are magical things, as well as a rotisserie chicken. So
now all I think is Costco.
Yeah, right. So, but it's like that. I don't name Costco, but she uses that to move through to the next way to spin drift. So when she spin drifts, she goes like on this earth related kind of like travels, and then, basically has to go through the warehouse supercenter and bypass the like 24-year-old rolls of toilet paper and all of that stuff and get whatever magical thing she's going to need. She never buys anything mundane, and then get on the other side and keep going wherever she's going to go. So so there's this whole process by which this happens, but on top of that, she sometimes is called into and pulled into the dreamscape or a nightmare or the nightmarescape, and where things happen that feel and are very real to her, but it's when she's asleep.
There is a scene in Maxwell where I'm writing about the fall of the angels, and in heaven it's like perfect and pristine. There's a kaleidoscope of colors, things that us mortals would never really be able to fathom. So I'm trying to collect words that are fantastical to describe that in the scene. As the angels are falling, I describe how every single one of them is going through, like, tumbling over their head, their feet, or falling on their backs. It's like mayhem. They don't understand what they have done wrong. And Maxwell at one point gets to turn around because their wings are breaking, it's going against the wind, it's going against the gravity, and he sees heaven tunneling away, like it's becoming farther and farther away. But while they're falling in this void of anything, gravity kicks in, and they all start, instead of falling down, they're falling back because the gravity shift of it, because they're no longer in heaven, but they're not yet to hell. Hell isn't even a thing yet. They're where they end up landing, they end up creating a hell. Hell in this series is a place of suffering. Well, what would be considered suffering? What is the bleakest parts of suffering? There's moaning, there's torment, and I started trying to figure out, well, what would be something visual. Well, how about roads that are cracked because they're so dry? So it would also then help me explain the vast difference of this perfect, pristine, loving environment to this cold, hardened place that is just now becoming a thing because of all the fallen angels.
The idea that these worlds are faith-based in a lot of respects, right? So there is lore to them faith-wise, and and I know that you have a certain faith that you're representing in your book as well. And so how much of that do you look at with this setting, as opposed to being able to use your creative spirit?
Well, there are a lot of, like, heaven and hell are a part of people's belief system, right? So I am writing a Jewish main character, which I think is sort of where you're trying to get to. And actually, in Judaism, we don't have a heaven and hell the way Christianity does. There just really isn't. It's not the same thing. The idea of heaven and sort of like a Dante-esque kind of hell is very Christian oriented and Christian rooted. It's something I think you and I have talked about before, Joe, where I had to sort of deal with that because I wanted to be able to play with that, with those ideas. But I have this Jewish main character, and I was like, well, in her faith, there isn't really a hell, like with a devil kind of thing. That doesn't exist. So how am I going to do that? And then I realized, my character summons on behalf of clients. She's sort of a fixer. So by the time someone gets to her and needs her to summon a being from some kind of other dimension or other plane, they've gone through every other option they possibly can. They're desperate, right? They would never get to her if they hadn't literally used up every other option. She has to spend a lot of time warning them that things don't always work out well when you summon beings of power, and they have to sign a contract and they have to prick their finger, and it's a whole big thing. As she says, there's a lot of crying and summoning. And so I thought, well, it doesn't really matter what it is to her, like what her personal faith is. What it matters is what the client believes. Right. And so if she has a Christian client who believes in hell, she can summon a demon. If she has a Japanese client who is more focused on their ancestry, she can summon an ancestor, or I have her summon a dragon at one point. Like, it just depends on what the client's real beliefs are. That sort of explains the fact that there are so many different planes of existence that all sort of exist in sort of a multiverse, but I never use that word, but like that all exist all at the same time in the same places, and that there is this DNA between them because they're all connected by faith and belief.
In lack of better terms, I'm atheist, yet I write about heaven and hell and gods and stuff. So it's definitely not faith-based. And then I take a lot of like lore and folk tales from a bunch of different places. Like I have Greek gods, Chinese gods, Hawaiian gods, I do have a heaven and hell, but I also have the Garden of Eden, which is a different place. And my main bad guy is Lilith, which is not even in like traditional Christian religion. It's more in the Quran and stuff like that. So I just kind of took inspiration from kind of everything because, well, in later books, you'll know why, but if they're just kind of all brought together.
I guess if you had to land on something, it would be more of Christianity, Catholicism. I don't practice, but my idea behind all of it was I wanted to take traditional tropes and ideas and characters and kind of flip them on their axis, make it to be as though they're more complicated like humans, like humanity, than kind of how they're portrayed and how they're built up to be. And I like to play with that sort of element that they are complicated. It's a giant family with, dad issues, especially as it pertains to, the fallen angels. And that was kind of my angle on that. There was a great deal of research involved. Obviously, you want to be true to a lot of the stories and as true to the characters as possible, because as mentioned before, these are people's faiths. This is some people, they really do live their lives by it, and you want to be sensitive to that and you want to be respectful to that, but at the same time building this new world and this different story, it's fiction, using those traditional ideologies.
I don't talk too publicly about my personal beliefs. It's something I hold very close to me. But it's not traditional in any shape or form. I have a background with Catholicism and Southern Baptism or Baptists and things like that. And I did have a period in my life where I just researched to try to figure out what was best for me. And a lot of that information ends up coming out in my work. Like with the Blasphemer series, everything from Christianity to voodoo to even like explaining where Greek mythical animals like the rooster came from and things like that. It all found its way in that series, coming out from vampires to werewolves to witches to all of it. As far as how close to the material that I was researching it is, in some ways yes, some ways no. That's where the imagination takes over, because I'm not writing books to teach somebody how to be a certain way or to do a certain thing. If I wanted to write that kind of book, I'll write that kind of book, but that's not what these books were for. They were mainly just to write an interesting story that I would have liked reading when I was growing up. And as far as trying to offend or not offend anybody, I do understand that everybody has their beliefs, but everybody nowadays is going to get upset over anything. So I can't try to pussyfoot on certain subjects because it's not going to matter, because there's always going to be somebody upset. Everybody gets bad reviews. Everybody upsets somebody. And I can't write like that. That's too stifling to me.
So you write a lot in the world itself, the other world, the Ethereal Worlds. And so is your process much different in that respect because it isn't something that's tangibly in front of you?
So for me, because a lot of the characters are walking among Earth, it's the same. It is when in like the book that I'm writing now within the series, it takes place more in like the heaven setting. It is a totally different manner. Angels they don't talk unless they're like spoken to, where if they're walking among people in Earth, they can talk freely. So it's different. And then hell is just kind of like a fun place to be kind of type thing currently, if you're a demon. And so it's different, but it's kind of the same, just depending on who you're talking to.
It was a little different because it forces you to flex that imagination muscle. the whole idea of my world is that things are falling apart and they're falling kind of into Earth. So it's kind of dealing with angels and all of that stuff kind of falling and pouring itself into our world, and how that would look and how that would feel and how that would affect humanity and everything else as we understand it. But also going into any kind of descriptions or scenes that are set outside of Earth, it was purely imaginative. I wouldn't say that I was influenced by any one thing. It was just trying to think outside the box as much as possible, but create something fun and create something as original as possible.
As far as, writing certain things, with the Blasphemer series, I really knew early on that I was going to upset people. That's where the series name came from, the Blasphemer. With certain ways I wrote it, I tried to keep to more of the traditional kind of aspects of heaven and hell. Like bad people go there, good people go up. I never understood that personally. Like, what defines a bad person as a bad person is the question I would ask. Like, we obviously know who would be considered a bad person, but does that mean those with mental illnesses go there? So I had to, with questions like that, I had to be delicate when writing certain things, because I do write of a character. He appears in The Harvest, which is the second book of the series, who is suffering from PTSD. He is not aware of the world, and then he's just slammed into it, and he's seeing things that we would never see, and it hits him very roughly. He learns that he is a seer of the past, so all these things that he thought were, might have been schizophrenia or whatever, are real for him. I had to ask questions like that, like, if you have something mentally going on with you, where would you go? Would you go to heaven? Would you get punished because you did this bad thing, but you were mentally influenced? And I think that that's actually a realistic thing now, because not everyone with mental illnesses are dangerous or violent or things like that. I myself have CPTSD, and I am not a violent person. So it really made me go against. I wanted to write something that didn't fully go along the lines of my own personal beliefs.
With Fairy, I actually drew a map, like, for myself. Like, I have a map that I created so that I knew where certain things were in relationship to other things, because even though I can play with time and space a little bit, I still wanted it in my mind to make some sense. Yeah, so those are very, like, real places with geography and locations to me in my mind, and hopefully I create that enough for the readers to see it.
I assume you're treating it more like a fantasy world in terms of the world building aspects of it, where you're keeping track of certain things and certain elements. Do you feel like you had to do a lot more research for those elements than you probably thought you might have, because you were creating them from thin air?
No, that was so much fun. I just did what I wanted. But I mean, okay, but to be fair, I have this vast unconscious, if you will, knowledge of fantasy literature, fantasy and urban fantasy, and magical realism, and epic fantasy, because I've been reading it my whole life.
Yeah.
So I think we unconsciously pull from some of those things and create and buy into some tropes, as well as like some fables and history and mythology, right? So in Fae, there is a king and a queen named Oberon and Titania, because that's the mythology that we all know and love. And, certain things that we all know that we share collectively out of our experience that we're drawing from, and plus our own reading history. And then, of course, we, the writer can use his or her imagination and try to create something a little different and new.
All right, guys. Well, I think I got enough. Is there anything you want to mention about Heaven and Hell that I didn't cover that you can think of? All right.
Anything I can say without spoiling anything in a future book.
Yeah, you were bordering on spoiling your book there a little bit. Yeah.
I didn't name who it was, so I was like,
You didn't know. That's true. You're very true. Very true. But I know. So.